This is the CHGO Cubs Podcast. My name is Corey. I am joined, as always, by Brendan. We welcome you to the Friday edition of the CHGO Cubs Podcast. As usual, we are not live, but please hop in the chat. We'll check through those comments. If you're listening to us on your podcast feeds, hello as well. We appreciate all you tuning in to a baseball team that is still waiting to maybe bring back their best hitter. Maybe not, maybe someone else. I don't know, Brendan. But what I do know is that we are coming to you Friday, February 9th. We are about under a week away from pitchers and catchers reporting. And if you were following some of the folks out of Mesa, a lot of them are already there, Brendan. So
to me, it's
showing up, but the team is maybe not complete.
Listen, to me, it started. Dansby supposedly is already in Mesa, according to him. Came yesterday. Nico's throwing footballs out there. Justin Steele, ALLCITY already has been there for like a week and a half. The guys are there. We're just waiting for Cody Bellinger to stroll on in with some Jordans on and give our first baseman a hug.
On his like 6-year, 170-something million, right?
Too expensive.
No.
I don't know about that. Too expensive for Jeff.
Yeah. I don't think we're going to touch too much on that. I think we've all heard plenty about Cody Bellinger. You know where Brendan and I stand. And even
I'm going to make a commitment to you. I'm sick of talking about that. I'm done talking about Scott Boras and Cody Bellinger. It's over. We've been doing this for 4 months. I'm done.
Yeah, and I think, between I was in the studio the other day with Luke, Cody, and Ryan. Like, I think we've covered pretty much every angle, and even
exhausting.
Even the new what they're talking about now.
I'm done with that.
Yeah, like we've covered that. They're talking about the kind of waiting game, and if he gets over 200 million, this and that, and since the beginning we've said if it gets to a certain point, it's not going to be the Cubs, and I think it's the same thing. So I don't want to cover that too much. What I do want to get into, have some random stuff, some fun stuff, but I think the meat of it, pitchers and catchers are reporting. Obviously, those are the guys that go first. Like, let's talk about stuff we're watching for. What are we excited for? What are we looking for in spring training? Things to keep an eye on. When we get to the positional players, we'll get to position battles and who's playing where and how they're sharing reps and all that other stuff. But I think pitchers and catchers show up first. We'll talk some pitchers and catchers. And I think that's, Brendan, honestly, like what we have to do. I think everybody that covers this team, podcast, writes about it, talks about it on the radio, wherever it may be, you have to cover the free agency. You have to cover Bellinger, et cetera, et cetera. But also right now, the team that is actually the Chicago Cubs is going to show up to camp. And some of these guys are not on that team. And it reaches a point where we have to focus on who's actually playing for this baseball team right now. And when that changes, we'll get back into it.
Are you going to talk about Pat Hughes' sweater? Yes. I've been waiting for you to bring that up. Do you want to get into it?
Yeah, we're going to start with that. But I like to, set the expectations for our
we have a lot of pitching to talk about. I have different pitch types I want to talk about, but
grand.
Yeah, we have a lot. No charts.
No charts.
No
now,
graphs.
See, I don't think you should say that because now the viewership number is
I actually have all my graphs loaded over the past year right here. So I do have that.
We're going to do a graph retrospective. So if you've been missing sitting in a statistics 101 course in college, we can take it right now. I'm kidding.
That's when I started making graphs. That's when I started making graphs. I have some from 2016. I sent you some a year ago, I think.
But I do want to start. The Cubs on their social channels on Thursday released their promo schedule for the year. It was a great video. One of the Cubs productions, the Cubs social team, a lot of the Cubs content is excellent. The people that produce it, shoot it, write it, work on it. We have been very fortunate, I think, as a team. If you consume social content, the Cubs have been very good at it for quite some time. And they released the schedule, and it was getting the people who were the focus of the promo items, to sort of drum it up in a photo shoot. And one of them is a Pat Hughes sweater. And I think it's a shirt, but it looks like Pat Hughes' iconic sweater. Pat Hughes is in the video. Incredible acting. Not that I didn't he can do anything. I always assumed, but I didn't know he had such acting chops. And that was a very pleasant surprise.
Well, the Oscars are next year. I don't think he can be nominated for this upcoming one, but the following year, you have the Hall of Fame. What's next?
Yeah.
An Academy Award, I think.
I am into it. And I think it would be, I think they do it like the following year. So it would basically be Pat Hughes versus Jeremy Allen White for season 2 of The Bear.
There you go.
And the Emmy goes to
Chicago representing.
So I believe that's on April 6th when the Cubs take on the Dodgers. And my only question, Brendan, is like, do you think I can get somebody to sponsor like the tent that I'm going to have to sleep in outside of Wrigley Field? Because you haven't, you're not at Wrigley Field as frequently. And I don't take you for a, like, I need to get a bobblehead kind of guy, unless it's like Nico with his shirt off or something.
Okay.
But I think there's always a line. There's a big line for some of these things, and you got to get there pretty early if you want the merch. I'm not really that kind of guy, but for a Pat Hughes sweater T-shirt, I think I have to be.
Now, what will really make that day is if Pat Hughes himself is handing them out.
Wow.
Entering the gate. Can you imagine that? You may pass out.
Yeah, no.
Could you ever imagine in your life a scenario where Pat Hughes is handing you a sweater in beautiful historic Wrigley Field?
No, but what a picture you're painting,
man.
A Pat Hughes-esque painting, if you will.
It's very bright blue skies on a brisk April afternoon. Man.
And handing the sweaters to him is, of course, former Cub and All-Star Ron Coomer.
There you go.
That's my vision. But yeah, it was a great video. And, always they were, they were poking fun at Ian Happ for not smiling. Patrick Wisdom was doing his collarbone thing from when he's hitting home runs. It was a great video. And I very much look forward to being able to rock some Pat Hughes merch. So looking forward to that. Beyond that, again, we are still waiting for the Chicago Cubs to figure some stuff out. And that's about the update. This is dragging on, and it may continue to drag on. So if the rumor mill is your kind of thing, I think we're going to stay away from it for the most part. But hey, like we're all paying attention. And as I've said before, the CHGO Cubs team will assemble in minutes to break down any of those major signings if they are with the Cubs. And I think no matter what Cody Bellinger does, the CHGO Cubs team will end up having a show on that decision whenever that comes, whether that is in the month of February, March, next season. I don't know. Yeah. So yeah, maybe it's like, he pulls a Kimbrel, doesn't sign until what was that, June?
Don't even threaten that scenario.
Yeah.
I didn't think about that.
That one might work out for Jed though. Like then he only signs him if they really need him.
I guess. Yeah. They're a contender by the trade deadline. They overshot their expectations and their Pacoda projections.
Now we'll pay for Cody Bellinger.
By the way, I'm surprised you didn't mention the new projections.
Well, I talked about that in the studio on Wednesday, I think, with Cody, Luke, and Ryan. And we talked about your tweet, your graph. Luke did a very good job.
Oh, really? I got to go back and listen to the
graph. No, he does. Nobody understands it. Myself included. No, I do. Like my basic, who cares? Like it's a computer projection, like not on your tweet. I mean, the projections in and of themselves. I didn't think they were particularly surprising. I think that's about.
I actually thought they were higher than we both imagined. I thought maybe like 78, 79, given the current state of the roster.
I think so. The only thing that I found particularly interesting, they're like particularly down on Imanaga. I think I saw on
that stuff. Honestly, you have a better chance of projecting than those computers.
Of course, it's just if I'm looking at stuff to find interesting at all, and I think I was seeing on Twitter some discussion on Thursday, like that they have him projected for like one of the highest home run rates. I think it would be in like league history, like just an exceptional home run rate that they're predicting.
Sick.
So that's my thought on it. I think as far as the NL Central being projected to be very tight and a lot of low to mid 80s team, I think that lines up with what we might expect going into the season and highlights a lot of what we've talked about of wanting them to address on the roster. So, we'll see how the rest of the offseason plays out and if those projections change and if you care about that or not.
Well, it sets the stage too, because a lot of the projections against the Cubs is derived from their lack of pitching confidence, including Shota. Even Justin Steele may not have those stellar projections that you might like. Guys getting older like Kyle Hendricks, and then the lower end with Javier Assad, Wesneski, etc. So the projections, in part, justifiably so, don't account for some of the natural progression you and I think those pitchers will take.
Yeah, and I think we'll talk about some of that in a little bit. I wanted to start, Brendan. I know how much you love trivia, and I have one for you.
Gosh.
And I wanted to start, and then maybe we'll use that. We'll get to our first ad break, and then we'll jump into some what to watch for as pitchers and catchers report. But I was looking, this one coming to us from @Brooksgate on Twitter, X, if you want to call it that.
Okay.
Since 2010, for each team, which player has the longest hitting streak for each team? So which person since 2010 has the longest hitting streak in a season for the Chicago Cubs? The Kyle Farnsworth one was very difficult. I didn't expect you to get that. I feel like you can get this one.
I mean, it's such a long time range. 2010, since 2010, so even including like the last couple of years?
Yeah.
Okay. Off the top of my head, longest hit streak. Can you give me like some type of hints?
So the easy hint would be
I don't want the easy hint. Give me like a medium.
No, I'm saying the hint that doesn't give it away, but I think that helps is it's definitely a player you would expect this answer to be. If I told you, and it's not an incredible amount of games. The Cubs actually have one of the lowest streak numbers on this list. It was only 16 games. But if you were looking back at the last 15 years of Cubs baseball, and I told you one person got a hit in 16 straight games, you'd be like, oh, yeah, totally.
Starlin Castro?
No.
God. I want to say David DeJesus just to be like, hipster about it. No.
Is that it? Does that fit the clue I just gave you? No.
I don't know. He was a contact guy. Nigo? Has Nigo had 16? I'm horrible at this. I hate this.
Do you want the give it away clue?
No.
Okay.
No, because the clue, sometimes I may not even know if that clue is helpful or not. So I embarrass myself.
It would be helpful. If I give it away, it's helpful.
Is it Russo?
No.
Chris Bryant?
No.
Just tell me the player. I hate doing this. Just tell me the player.
He has a very significant hit in the World Series.
Ben Zobrist. Okay. Was it 2016? He had that?
Yeah. Which
important year, right?
So not only did he have the longest hit streak in the last 14 years of Cubs baseball, but later that season, he would be the MVP of the World Series for the Chicago Cubs because they won the World Series.
World Series, correct? Yes, people do forget that. Yeah,
I feel like that was a good clue. He is the person. If I said, "Oh yeah, who got the hit every game?"
I feel like Starlin Castro was a good guess though.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, high contact guy, had that stretch early on. I thought he was a good guess.
So yeah, I kind of like these. The trivia stuff isn't our normal shtick, but it's in lieu of spending 40 minutes on Cody Bellinger and Matt Chapman again, or getting Brendan riled up about Nick Madrigal. You know what I mean?
Wow.
You're the one.
Don't even bring me down that direction. You're already getting me riled up. But I was gonna say, I remember the weirdest things, but when it comes to stuff like trivia questions, I can't remember anything.
Yeah.
But like I remember weird things. It's just those types of questions I never get ever.
Yeah. I also did want to highlight, we had a few people that reached out via Twitter or some via point out that they also share a disdain for one Austin Kearns from their youth.
Yes.
So that was kind of funny that some other folks were like, that was exactly who I was thinking.
God, I
So
hate that guy.
yeah, unfortunately, a lot of us have been scarred by Austin Kearns, and
That era, Sean
those
Casey,
scars never
Austin
heal.
Kearns,
Yes.
Adam
Yeah.
Dunn, Barry Larkin.
Yeah.
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 Aaron Boone.
All right, so we'll get to our first ad break in a second here, but I do want to sort of set the table for talking about guys arriving in Mesa for pitchers and catchers and getting ready here. And I wanted to read a tweet from one Justin Steele that came on Thursday afternoon. And it reads, I watched Shota Imanaga throw a bullpen today. I'm on eBay now looking for cards. Guy is filthy. So I believe Justin Steele is a baseball card guy. And look, they're on the same team, but, he's putting his money where his mouth is. He's investing in Imanaga memorabilia. So he liked what he saw.
Go. He may teach Steele a few things. Could you imagine Justin Steele with a splitter, Corey? That would be insane.
No.
Had that rising fastball,
Yeah.
that slider, maybe throwing a little bit of a slower breaker like a curve, a splitter by 2025. Steele may be the best left-handed pitcher of all time if he develops that pitch.
Well,
hey,
let's pump the brakes a little bit.
It's possible. According to Stuff Plus, it's possible.
Yeah. I did read, there was a piece too. They were talking to John Lester. I think it was at a golf thing, but, talking about how he was a little disappointed, when he found out they were firing his friend. He did admit that he felt a little not quite as connected to the Chicago Cubs in that moment, but that he talked to some people and understood. So it was a very diplomatic answer. There's one thing about John Lester. He always knows the right thing to say in a situation.
I mean, like in his mind, like, you know what? Ross is my guy. He's my friend. But yeah, he could be kind of a dumbass at times.
Yeah.
So like, it does make a little sense.
He's like, why do you guys think I was yelling at him so much?
Yeah. So if anyone understands, it's probably John Lester.
If I was the manager of the Chicago Cubs and they fired me, you'd still support them, or?
No, I would absolutely picket in front of Wrigley Field until you were hired back.
Yeah.
If they fired you, I'm done. I'm gone. I'll go start a Padres podcast.
Okay. So you can follow Yu Darvish around.
Man. I miss Yu Darvish.
I know.
All right, let's do this ad break here before we start talking about Yu Darvish for the next 20 minutes, and then we'll get back into some pitching trends. First ad break here from Circa Sportsbook. Games will strive to be a -110 split on the Circa Sports menu, unlike other sports books, which may use -115 or -120 splits. Circa Sports keeps as little money as possible on large market bets, especially compared to other books who limit bettors. Circa will never limit bettors based on their winnings. Every player has the same limits, unlike other books who do limit those winning players. So we encourage bettors to download and explore all betting apps available. There are also real people behind the Circa Sports brand who resolve issues in a timely fashion, unlike other books who use chatbots. All aspects of the app are being run by the same folks who run the main Circa Sportsbook at Circa Resort and Casino in Las Vegas. I saw a lot of our CHGO Bears crew is out there in Vegas. Great resort. I spent some time there over the past few years. Pretty fun. So download the Circa Sports Illinois app at circasports.com/Illinois-app to sign up today. Also be on the lookout for Circa events, watch parties, and tailgates. And if you or somebody you know may have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER, 1-800-426-2537, or text GAMB to 833-234, or visit areyoureallywinning.com. Second break here from our wonderful sponsor, Empire Today. With Empire Today, you get shop at home convenience, the right product for your needs, quick and professional installation, and a low price guarantee. They keep shopping for floors simple with a curated product selection. Empire's philosophy is to help you find what you need, not overwhelm you with thousands of choices and substitutes. What they leave out of their selection is as important as what they put in. Empire's product team combs through thousands of product samples each year to find the perfect styles. They also service their own warranties. If an issue does arise, you can just call Empire. They service all of their warranties themselves. You will never have to track down a manufacturer's phone number. And if you're interested in new flooring, well, they have a virtual floor designer. It's a great way to see how new floors will look in your space. It's easy. Just snap a picture and instantly see how those floors will look in your room. Schedule a free in-home estimate today. All listeners can receive a $350 off discount when they use the promo code CHGO. Restrictions do apply. Again, see empiretoday.com/CHGO for details.
All right, y'all. As always, reminder, check out allchgo.com. Check out the benefits of becoming a diehard. Get a free shirt when you sign up, access to the Discord. I know Cody's been doing some Discord-only audio chats. I think you can do video, too, in the Discord as well. Get your membership card. You get discount on events. I know we just had a takeover at the United Center for the Chicago Bulls game with our great Bulls crew. So do visit allchgo and check that out, allchgo.com. and check that out. And shout out, if you are a Bears fan, shout out to our Bears team that's been in Las Vegas covering the Super Bowl. And I got to give a shout out to our guy, Greg Braggs, because I admire, they're interviewing everybody. And of course, they're there to talk about the Bears and the Super Bowl and the number one pick. And I'm not really a football guy, but I admire Braggs at Patrick Mahomes' press conference, asking him about Justin Fields and Caleb Williams. He went to Las Vegas to get answers for Bears fans.
Yeah.
And he went and did it. And I love it.
I love it.
I love it. He went there to get the answers and he got them. So
I gotta
they're
say,
still
too,
there.
Bragg's looking pretty fashionable. I saw those Vegas get-ups late at night, black shirts. Good for him. Yeah. Living his best life.
But check it out. The Bears team is there. They're covering it every day. They've done some great interviews. So do check out CHGO Bears crew for all things Bears and NFL and Super Bowl. So back to the Chicago Cubs. Let's talk spring training storylines as it relates to the pitchers and catchers, Brendan, because I think actually spring training isn't always the be all end all. Of course, we know this. They're not always looking at each individual result from an exhibition game against the B team of the Los Angeles Dodgers to make every decision. And if a guy gives up runs or has a bad outing, we always talk that guys are working on stuff. They're getting in shape. They're building up their arm strength, and you don't want to read into stuff too much. But I think this Cubs team does have some areas that spring training is going to be quite informative about as we go into this season. There's a lot of pitchers. We don't know what their exact role is going to look like when this team breaks camp, at least. And I know the guys kind of talked about that a little bit with Tommy Hotovy in terms of having so many guys who could maybe be starters, maybe they're long relievers. Do they get converted into shorter relievers like ALLCITY has done? What's the hierarchy of the bullpen as we go through spring training and break camp? So, I think a good chunk of the pitching staff is kind of set, but where they fit in terms of their roles and how they're utilized by now Craig Counsell, something we still have a decent number of questions about, Brendan. So when you first look at this group, what are some of the first things that jump to mind? I'm going to read the reports from Mesa every day because I'm trying to figure out what they're doing with this guy or what kind of role this person's going to have.
I'm personally more interested in the back end of the rotation. So you already know top three. It's going to be Steele, Taillon, Hendricks, and then Shota. Those are your top four, actually. Now, what they do in the 5 spot is going to be interesting. For example, Wesneski, could he get the shot, or will they transition him to more of a primary fireman reliever role? Is it going to be Jordan Wicks from day one? Is it going to be Javier Assad from day one? So those 3 are going to get most of my interest. Now, separate from those 3, just to lay the groundwork here before we get into it, I am curious of what Taillon looks like. He's been working hard throughout the offseason. He texts Tommy Hotovy all the time about pitch design and catching up on their offseason routines in addition to fantasy sports. But personally, is he going to exude confidence in his fastball? Is he going to exude confidence in a different pitch type. Because if Taillon can regain that fastball value that he had, and not through stuff, but just by command as well, and get confidence to where he was with that pitch with the Yankees and Pirates, then his projection to me is the one most likely to break. Because if the sweeper and the breaking pitches just sustain themselves, then the amount of whiffs he gets plus regaining that fastball value should put him among some of the top pitchers in the league. So that is very important to me, just to regain that position for Taillon on the top of the rotation. And then if you want to get super ambitious outside of the bullpen, just narrowing in on this rotation, Tommy Hotovy did mention pitch design stuff with Justin Steele. That's interesting. With Steele, you already know what he has. Cut ride fastball. He has another type of fastball in which he can go down and in to batters. Then he also has a true slider. So he kind of already has three different types of cutting horizontal pitches. Is there room for something else? A changeup, perhaps, to go the other way. Maybe he has more confidence with a slower breaker, like more of a slower slurve or more of a curveball. I'll be interested to hear more about that, because a lot of people long term look at someone like Steele's profile, being a two-pitch guy, and they question whether he can sustain that type of success. So if early on in his career he starts developing that third pitch, then in my mind, his projection window of value starts to elongate. So among all the different storylines, which there's a lot on the pitching side, separate from the bullpen too, you have the fifth pitching spot. Is it going to be Wicks? Is it going to be Assad? Is it going to be Wesneski? If not Wesneski, what does he look like in the bullpen? And then separately atop the rotation, how does Taillon look? What about that fastball? More ambitiously, Justin Steele. Is there going to be a new pitch type?
I am of the belief that your conversation about Jameson Taillon with Tommy Hotovy
I fixed him.
is possibly the missing link.
Tommy's like, well,
Tommy,
he was taking notes.
yeah, he
Yeah, he was going
answered
there.
diplomatically, but he was like, I never looked at this horizontal break on his feet. Brendan's right.
I had the
We
graph right
cracked it.
there. I had the graph right there. That was
Yeah.
custom data representation.
So it does not matter, but as of this moment on Cubs.com, their depth
Yeah.
chart, they have Javier Assad in the 5th spot.
Do you think he
It
starts
does
there?
not matter, but I'm just reading what it says right now.
Do you think he starts there? If you had a guess right now.
I was kind of leading Wicks, honestly.
Yeah.
I feel like he felt like the more obvious guy to give the spot to, but that's part of the discussion, and that's kind of what I mean about there are, you and I have been doing this show together for what is this, our 8th season? 7th?
Ninth.
9th?
I'm a little offended you don't know the year, It's like not knowing your anniversary.
Okay.
16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24 to count on your fingers. For me, it's technically my 10th because you came a little bit after. So this is my decade.
And I revolutionized the show, but
you definitely did, be quite honest.
Yeah. So this is our 9th spring training, our 9th
Our
pitchers
9th
and
spring training,
catchers.
correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we've had years where a lot of the roster is really set when they show up, especially the good years. That's when it's mostly set. And you're kind of, it's just get through to spring healthy, everybody looking good, ready to play. There's not really that much to watch for. I feel like this is one of those springs, maybe not the most intriguing, but there is a lot to look for. And it is going to be interesting to see not only their logic for how they set up this rotation, at least to start, but what maybe those determining factors are. Is Craig Counsell going to look back at the end of last year and kind of see how guys finished and pair that with how they look now? If a guy, and I'm always curious, like I say that the spring stuff doesn't matter, but if a pitcher comes out and is just mowing guys down, it certainly makes it tougher on the front
people will
office or
point
the
to Hayden
coaches.
Wesneski's spring last year. Like, well, he had a great spring, and look what happened.
Sure.
So,
well, and that's the question. Do you read into that at all? Do you put no weight to it? Do you ride a hot hand, even though it's exhibition games against, sometimes by the 5th inning, a bunch of single A or double A guys? it's tougher to tell. But I do think the Cubs have some intriguing decisions to make. And I think that first one is indeed how they're setting up that rotation. And then, of course, the follow-up to that, let's say it is Jordan Wicks who gets that fifth spot. What is the role for Javier Assad? What is the role for Hayden Wesneski? What is the role for someone like Drew Smyly? All guys that were being asked to either start or go multiple innings all throughout 2023. So it is going to be kind of interesting to see how they make those decisions and what they do. Again, my instinct, just as someone watching the end of last year, was Jordan Wicks makes the most sense as the person to try in that spot. Now, at the same time, there was quite an uproar when the Cubs made the decision not to start Javier Assad in lieu of Marcus Stroman toward the end of last year when Stroman rushed back, and that did not go very well. So I think there are probably a lot of people who are clamoring for the ass man and thinking that he did not kind of got a little bit of a raw deal, in those last few starts at the end of 2023.
Yeah. If I had a bet, it's going to be Wicks. And the reason is both developmentally, but also I think it does give the Cubs the best opportunity to leverage their optimal construction from their bullpen and starting rotation. For example, if you put Wicks in a bullpen, I do wonder about that transition. I do wonder if he can make it as a bullpen guy, having basically no experience coming out of the pen in recent professional history, whereas Assad already has that experience, knows how to get amped up. I think as a result, if you look at just a reliever role, who's likely to produce more value, it would probably be Assad. Now, who's likely to produce more value as a starting pitcher? It's a toss-up right now from a projection standpoint. It could be Assad, it could be Wicks. But for me, there's a certainty in that Assad will be a staple in that bullpen from day one. Now, things do happen. He could regress, of course, there's always a possibility. But from day one, there has to be a high degree of confidence that he can have value out of the pen. Second, with Wicks, he started 27 games last year across AA, AAA, and Major League Baseball and pitched all the way through the brink of October. So the natural progression for him is day one, every fifth day, or maybe every now and then you get a day off or a week off. And then you push that boundary from 27 starts to 30 starts, from 5 innings per start, maybe 5.5 innings to 6 innings per start. And I think that's the general progression you would want a young starting pitcher to have. I was talking to Greg Huss about this, and he said, last year, 25 starts was the brink for Wicks, and he got 27. So, of course, the next logical milestone is going to be him going above 25 and getting to maybe around 30 if all things work out. So it makes more sense for me just to give that opportunity to Wicks developmentally, but also too because it gives Assad a staple of value out of the bullpen.
Yeah, so I think a good way to wrap up or at least conclude this part of the conversation, at least looking at the starting rotation, is to read a couple quotes from around CubsCon from Jed Hoyer and then Tommy Hotovy. And the one from Jed Hoyer is he talked about, quote, writing out your 5 guys in the rotation. It just feels like those days have gone away. As an industry, as a team, you just don't do it anymore. Alluding to you need more than 5 guys. And then Tommy Hotovy going on to say, quote, the more options we have and the more flexibility that we have going into the season is always going to be the best way to start the season off. And then things always end up working themselves out. So I think you highlighted some of this too, but it is a discussion that we'll have through the spring, but likely it's one of those, if one of these guys is your favorite player and they don't get chosen to be a starter and you really want them to be, I wouldn't panic about it right away. It's just the guys breaking camp to sometimes in some cases might just be make those first 5 starts. Things can always change. The season always starts with some off days baked in. There's always a lot of rain, especially because they, for whatever reason, schedule the Cubs to play in Chicago. They always do this, and I never quite understand it. And I think they did it again. If I'm correct that it's the Dodgers for that Pat Hughes thing, that's in early April. Why don't they go to LA in April? It will never make sense to me. Somebody could explain it to me, and there could be a very good logistical reason. But I feel like the Dodgers play in Chicago when it is not going to be nice in Chicago, and then the Cubs go to LA in like August. You could not explain that to me in a way that would make sense.
Well, let me try.
Okay.
Because every year, baseball thinks, oh, of course, it'll be the Dodgers and the Cubs and the NLCS. Let's have this. What?
Why do they have to do it at Wrigley Field, though?
You're right about that. I got no explanation for
That's
that.
my point. It's I
never
they should
understand
start
on the West Coast. I never thought about that.
Yeah, so
Why
they
start on the West Coast?
do. So this year, at least, they do go to San Diego, Seattle, and Arizona early in the year. So
When
at
did
least
they go to
that's
San
good.
Diego? When did they go to San Diego? Do you have the schedule in front of you? This is great radio, but I'm curious.
April 8th to 10th.
Wow. Okay. Did not know that.
You're gonna get a look pretty early. But anyway, there's always off days baked in. There's rain, so games get postponed. So sometimes you don't even need 5 guys right out the gate anyway. But this rotation as well, and we've highlighted this, it has several guys where you need to maybe at least monitor how their usage throughout the year. If you are competitive, if you are competing in this division or competing for a playoff spot, as we saw last year, you need guys not to break down when it comes to September. And so there are real questions of, like you were talking about with someone like Wicks, how do you get Steele to that next level? We talked. He did not have his best starts toward the end of the year, and it was the largest workload he had experienced. So how do you make sure that he is better set up for that? Shota Imanaga, a guy coming from a different league, a different schedule in terms of how pitchers operate, how many pitches they throw, a different environment. So you're going to have to be careful about that. Kyle Hendricks, a guy that worked his way back from a shoulder injury, is obviously, on the older side. You have to be careful about that. These young guys, same thing you were just talking about. How do you make sure that they're going over their threshold or maybe trying to do more, but not completely falling apart and breaking down? So I think you're going to see a lot of movement from this team. And I think it may seem, I think as the game of baseball evolves, it might feel unnerving to some to not have that set 5-man rotation. But I think the Cubs have a lot of good depth here, and hopefully they can figure it out. I just think that when you hear that from Hottovy, when he says, just bring as many good guys and you'll figure it out, I think that can be a little unnerving for some folks. I think they like knowing, like, these are our starters. This is what we're going to do. This is the plan. And, saying like, well, these 4 to 5 guys maybe can get some starts. Maybe they're stretched out. It's a little more abstract. It's not quite as concrete.
I thought over the years we would be at a 6-man rotation by now. If you were to ask me in 2017, but 2024, will there be more frequent 6-man rotations? I would have been like, yeah, absolutely. So in a way, I'm surprised.
The tough part for that is always going to be the guys that want the ball, the John Lesters of the world that are like, I don't need the break. I don't want the break.
Yeah.
Pass over somebody else in the rotation because it's not me.
Exactly. And I think, if I were a Major League Baseball player, I would want to have the same attitude. And like, I think there is some validity to that, not just wanting to compete on a consistent basis, but just designing the consistent routine. I think guys are creatures of habits. Again, personally, I would want to know, okay, I'm pitching every 5th day. By the 3rd day, I need my side session. By the 4th day, I'm going to do this with my trainer. And if you every now and then change that routine up, then at least I can speak personally, I would not like that as a player. So I do think there's validity to keeping guys fresh and competing on a consistent basis, but also it does get the most out of them on a per start basis.
Yeah.
And earlier to your point, you mentioned Marcus Stroman, right? Stroman came back, tried to come out of the bullpen, came in Arizona, didn't really look the best in 1-2 inning spurts, but he did try it. And there's a lot of back and forth. Why is he starting over Assad?
Yeah.
And I think the justification was not Stroman's ego, if you will, but rather it's difficult to come out of the bullpen. It's difficult to adopt a routine you're not familiar with. So even if you go a few innings per start, that's the way you are accustomed to training. So I don't know. It's going to be a
I
delicate balance.
I also do, and I think we try to mention this when we discuss a lot of these guys, but it is also worth remembering when you're, evaluating, I think, the performance of some of the guys, this is a hard thing to do. And I know sometimes if a guy struggles or whatever, people don't want to hear that, but maintaining your arm and your stuff and knowing how to differently approach a 1 inning relief outing versus a 3 inning, relief outing versus a 6 inning start. That's not an easy
It's
thing
a
for a
different
pitcher to do.
environment.
It is a very
Yeah.
different. It is difficult to keep those mindsets and prepare for all those things. And that's not to preemptively make
No.
excuses or
Well,
anything.
that's what ALLCITY said.
Yeah, it's just I think it's a useful reminder, when we're looking at some of these guys like Hayden Wesneski or Jordan Wicks or Javier Assad, what the Cubs are asking them to do is not particularly easy. And I don't think everybody is necessarily accustomed or set up for success in that. And that's why you've seen some of the different experiments go certain ways. They tried ALLCITY as a starter, then they kind of wanted him to be more of a multi-inning utility knife kind of guy. And ultimately he
He's a
struggled
closer.
in those second innings sometimes and getting through multiple parts of the order. And now he's mostly, of course, sometimes he's asked to do more, but he's mostly a 3 to 4
High
out kind of guy,
leverage.
and
Yeah,
that's
it's
it.
crazy. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
So
And we'll probably
Right.
get into it throughout spring training, but I do think the Wesneski conversation will prompt a lot of discussions. It's going to prompt a lot of opinions of what you
A
want
lot of
to
people,
do
I think, are
with
kind of out
Wesneski.
on him. Not
And
out on
that's
him as ever being
no,
useful, but certainly as like a starter in that
absolutely.
experiment.
I
Yeah.
think right now going into the year, you have to not count on him producing significant innings as a starter. That's just the reality. But it doesn't discount what his stuff would look like in a bullpen role because we saw it maxing out 98, 99, heavy wipeout slider with 20 inches of horizontal. That's insane. But at the same time, he is young. The Cubs don't have a fifth starter. We're talking about Jordan Wicks, basically his true start rookie year. And we're talking about Javier Assad, who hasn't been a consistent five-man every fifth day guy as well. So there you have to leave the room and the available option there for Wesneski to take hold of that if he develops a complementary pitch type, which again, that will be discussion throughout spring training. Let's hit our first or second ad break, rather, come back at this and finish up our conversation on pitching. First ad break here from new sponsor, Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you pick more than or less than 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Prize Picks is really simple to play. I can make picks and submit my entry in less 60 seconds. Also, with the basketball season on our way, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball, but specifically basketball, with the Specials League, a league created specifically for combo projections that includes 2 or more players from different sports or leagues. For example, DeMar DeRozan plus DJ Moore at a combo of 10.5 of 3 points made or receptions. Or with the Super Bowl coming up, maybe you combo Travis Kelce at 8 receptions and DeMar DeRozan at, I don't know, 7 threes or whatever. They also have quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types that make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Go to prizepicks.com/CHGO and use code CHGO for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/CHGO and use code CHGO. Daily fantasy sports made easy. Okay, you know what else is easier, Corey? It's getting easier for businesses to switch to electric vehicles. That's something we all can get behind for the health of the planet and for the well-being of all of us who share it.
That is right, Brendan. The electric grid is evolving to meet your cleaner energy needs as we all move with confidence toward an electric tomorrow. Whether you have one delivery van or a whole fleet of shipping trucks, ComEd can help guide you to make the changes that make sense.
So what should business owners do?
They should go to ComEd.com/clean to learn more about the resources, fleet rebates, and infrastructure incentives available to help businesses go electric. If you own a business, don't wait. Start making your plan today to switch to electric vehicles. Good for business, good for the planet, good for all of us. Go to ComEd.com/clean.
Did you say ComEd.com/clean?
That's right, Brendan. Go now and see how going electric connects us to a better way of doing business and a better future for generations to come. Talking about some of the, Super Bowl props and games you can check out on Prize Picks. And I don't think this is one of the options, but what do you think the odds are that during Usher's halftime show, Cody Bellinger comes out and reveals a Cubs jersey? Do you think that's something that's possible or no?
No, I do. I think maybe minus 105, actually. I think it might be probable. If you want to make a dramatic entry, that's the way to do it.
I think very possible that Usher and Cody Bellinger are close friends, and Usher would use this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to allow Cody Bellinger to announce that he's re-signing with the Cubs.
You know how
on a modest 6-year contract.
Sometimes you have these Super Bowl halftime shows. You got the primary guy like Usher, and then someone comes in for a surprise.
Yeah, the guests.
And so, you have Cody Bellinger, but you know what? What about two guests behind Cody Bellinger? You ready for this? Matt Chapman. There you go. And then everyone just collapses.
And then everybody watching the Super Bowl is going, who?
Yeah.
Who are these guys? Who's Matt Chapman?
He can probably throw a ball faster than Patrick Mahomes. I'm serious about that.
Everyone listening and watching knows of your affinity for Matt Chapman by now.
Well, let's not get too crazy. I'm not going to give him 7 years, but I do like Matt Chapman. Great third baseman.
Yeah. So let's transition to the bullpen a little bit and just things, again, that we are looking for. I think you're going to have some specific ones. I know we talked about this a little bit. I think the hierarchy for sure. And last year, ALLCITY was certainly the closer, but there were definitely times if he was down, Merriweather was doing it, Leiter was doing it. And early in the year, there was that one point where Leiter and ALLCITY were kind of sharing that duty a little bit. So do they kind of set that hierarchy up? Do they kind of go the same way they did last year where, hey, it's Craig Counsell, he's going to bring in who he wants, depending on the game, depending on the situation? Where does Hector Neris fit into this in terms of that kind of top level hierarchy? And then I think beyond that, who were the last kind of guys to make this bullpen? I think we've talked about guys like Luke Little, Daniel Palencia, and other guys that we've seen a little bit of. Do they make the team? Do we have any non-roster invitees that, show up and take spring training by storm and earn their way into the bullpen? Are they done making additions to the bullpen? I think that's where I'm looking. And I know, you have some probably more specific pitcher related things that you're going to be watching for as pitchers and catchers show up.
Number one for me is Drew Smyly. It's not because I think Drew Smyly is going to be, a lockdown reliever. I'm just fascinated by the entire process. I was not particularly thrilled at the time of giving Drew Smyly a 2-year contract. I thought the commitment for Drew Smyly was a little bit too much of a risk, similar to the Trey Mancini problem, if you will, committing fewer money in AAV, but longer years. So the reason I'm fascinated by Drew Smyly, because to me, that signals that $9.5 million might actually be valuable. It may not be dead money. And he's been working on a new splitter this offseason. He's been posted by Driveline. He's been working Driveline pretty significantly over the past few months. About 6 weeks ago, there was one quick TrackMan video of a split cutter looking thing. And then about a week ago, he was on a baseball field throwing that splitter to live batters. I don't know who those live batters were. They didn't look particularly good, but they were live batters. And again, he was throwing splitters a lot. Almost half the pitches in that video were splitters. So there's two ways of looking at this. Is a splitter more of this side project that maybe becomes a pitch? Or is it really a dominant focus where he wants to add in this new pitch? If he does add in that new pitch, how does it play up? Because it is pretty unique in terms of its shape. So just from a curiosity standpoint, that to me is pretty fascinating, because we talked about Assad and Wicks and Wesneski and the capability of going multiple innings, but even Drew Smyly has that potential as well. If he does not add his secondary pitch, then to me, I'm not optimistic about him. But at the same time, even if he doesn't have that secondary pitch, maybe some mechanical things were cleaned up and the command returns to what we saw earlier in the year. So number one in that bullpen amongst all those storylines, I think is Smiley, because that to me has the best chance of getting the most value from a pure innings volume perspective.
So a question for you as somebody that digs into a lot of this specific pitching stuff. And I think it could apply to someone like Tyone, but even Drew Smiley, when you're talking about him maybe adding new pitches and looking a little bit different in his repertoire, how do you evaluate that in your position as a, fan that is not there, is not, unless they post it like the Driveline video, you don't get those metrics and that StatCast data or TrackMan data.
Yeah.
How do you evaluate how someone looks when you're just looking for the first few weeks? It's just bullpens that you might see a couple pitches out of. And then ultimately, again, these exhibition games that you never really know how you can read into them. How do you evaluate when we're talking about someone like Tyone, who obviously was very up and down last year? You're looking for specific things to be different, or Smiley bringing in new pitches. How do you evaluate with the limited information and video how guys look, or can you not really do that in spring training? You kind of have to just trust the coaches and the results.
More so on body language and what they actually reveal to the media. For example, Kyle Hendricks was saying before he came back from injury, I feel great. Smile on his face, really enthusiastically, he felt good. And there were times where I thought Kyle Hendricks would not pitch again for the Cubs, but he was very demonstrative of how good he felt, and he looked pretty good. So I think you have to take guys like that at their word. Likewise, last year we heard about Tyone's new sweeper. A lot of confidence with the pitch. He had one of the best sliders last year in Major League Baseball, which is pretty funny to think about. Similarly, you have Michael Fulmer also demonstrating that he felt comfortable with the sweeper last spring. From day one, that was his dominant secondary pitch, a pitch he had just developed. So if they're talking about it in the media, then that to me is the most significant piece of information. Now, to your point about looking at the pitches, let's say on a Driveline Twitter video, you have to take that with a grain of salt. Is not the right word, but you have to consider why they're doing that. There are times where pitchers just mess with stuff. John Lester, I remember very vividly in 2017, he was throwing changeups like a third of the time during starts. And there's been other guys who just throw only fastballs during starts. And the reason is personal. The reason is individualistic. So it's hard to actually interpret what the motivation is for a specific pitch. It could be confidence that they actually feel that pitch, or it could be the complete opposite, where they have no confidence and they want to throw it as much as possible to gain that confidence. That's why I default at what they tell us. I think that's important. But also, too, you can look at the pitch shapes and you can imagine what it could look like in its optimal form, and it sets the barrier, or not the barrier, it can set the flag in place of what that particular pitch could look like over time with more adjustments.
Okay, that's fair. So getting back to the bullpen, other guys you're watching, things to watch for, maybe in particular on some of the newer additions. I think with Hector Neris, he's an extreme veteran. He's one of the most durable relievers of the last several years. That seems like his spring is going to be going through the motions, getting himself ready to be in the season, and he's going to be in a pretty prominent role for Craig Counsell's bullpen. Again, how some of these guys shake out, we'll see. But what about some of those guys like Daniel Palencia, Luke Little, Yency Almonte, who they acquired from the Dodgers? What do you look for in guys like that? How do they kind of separate themselves or really earn that position in the bullpen?
I think a lot of it will come down to options too. It may not just be how they look and competing for spots, but I think, for example, you look at Jose Cuas, he has two options, and options be damned. I would probably start the season with Jose Cuas over Almonte, but Almonte has no more options. So if I'm going to bet Almonte starts and might get that last spot over someone like Cuas. If you start looking at just who those 8 relievers could be, it starts to bulk up. Adbert Alzolay, Hector Neris, Julian Merriweather, Mark Leiter, Drew Smiley, Almonte. Those are 6 guys right there. Now you have 2 guys open. It could be Wesneski for that 7th if he doesn't get that starting spot, right? And even if it's not Wesneski, maybe it's Assad, right? Already you got 7 relievers, maybe 8 if you field all of Wicks, Assad, and Wesneski. So there might be a scenario where Wicks starts the year in AAA, but it gets very dicey. So for Palencia, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish your thought.
Well, if you look at Palencia and then you look at Luke Little, I would imagine they start the year in AAA simply out of options. But if you look at Little and Palencia, I would put them among the guys who had the highest ceiling, given their stuff. But it doesn't mean that they have to start the year, because you have to spread out this value of your bullpen with limited option guys going into this year. That is one of the disadvantages of this current Cubs bullpen, is they don't have the flexibility that they had in previous years with a lot of guys able to be optioned.
Yeah. So again, the depth chart on Cubs.com is not the correct who's breaking camp with the team and stuff, but I do think it's just interesting. And again, probably based on options and stuff like that. That when you look at it, they have Assad in the rotation. They have Wicks and Hayden Wesneski not on that depth chart. So again, that is not a real, it's just how they're listing it on their official website. Just interesting to see it like laid out that way without those guys, because I think a lot of people, they're very much in their plans and their vision for this team. So it's just interesting to look at it and not see them there. But yeah, they'll piece it out. And I think it goes to the quotes that I read from Jed. Jed was talking about the rotation, and I think Hottovy was as well when I read those quotes earlier. But Hottovy's in particular applies to the entire pitching staff. Like the guys that break camp in that bullpen will not be the only people that they use in that bullpen. And having that extended depth and sort of a plan of action for everybody is going to be crucial to a pitching staff like this. And especially, again, given the issues that this team had last year with the bullpen falling apart, very few people being reliable in the most I guess it was the most critical. I was going to say the most critical stretch of the season, but also the pre-deadline stretch was the most critical part, because then we don't even get to September. Whatever you want, whichever.
Sure.
A and B as far as what was most important, but the bullpen broke down. So I think having that depth is going to be very important. And yeah, I think that is a lot of this stuff is potentially, I think, pretty locked up. Of course, we're waiting to see how free agency plays out. That's going to greatly affect the offense and where certain guys are playing. But, certain things we know to be true. Yan Gomes is going to catch a lot of games behind the plate, presumably with Miguel Amaya, and the army of minor league depth catchers that the Chicago Cubs have assembled in this offseason behind them, leading the way at catcher. Dansby Swanson is going to play 162 games at shortstop, or as many as Craig Counsell will let him. So somewhere close to that. Nico is going to be at second base every day, almost every day. Ian Happ in left, Seiya in right. Michael Busch, they've said, is going to get basically every opportunity to hit against righties. So there's certain things we know. But there is a lot for this team that still is going to have to get shaken out as far as spring training. So I think, again, unlike some other years, for some folks, maybe that makes it more interesting. I think for a lot of folks, they maybe preferred the kind of pre-2016 vibe where it was basically like, we just get to enjoy these games and then we're going to hit the ground running and try to win a World Series. I prefer that personally. But we've also had years where, the position battles are not particularly interesting. The team doesn't look that exciting. And it's kind of like, all right, we're just biding our time here. So I think at least for this coming spring training, there is some stuff to be watching for. There are jobs to be earned and potentially jobs to be lost by some of these guys. So it's going to be interesting to see how they go about that, how these guys perform, and, how they're even utilizing some of these guys in the early going. I think they talked at CubsCon about keeping a lot of those multi-inning potential guys stretched out to start with, and then kind of working backward if you need to reduce the role or change the role. So stuff to watch for. I will ask you this, and I maybe the answer is obvious. My answer is obvious. But in terms of on the pitching staff, when these guys are all there and we're getting the daily videos and stuff like that, the person you are most excited to just watch even if it's just throw a bullpen. I just want to see this guy again on a baseball field or for the first time.
Ooh, probably Shota.
That's my answer. I feel like that's the easy answer.
Probably Shota. Yeah. I want to see that release point, that low release point with that rising fastball. So
I think that's the easy answer, just because we're still waiting on that, especially in a Cubs uniform over here in the United States. Like that I think is what we're waiting for. And especially now, you've got the Justin Steele filthy seal of approval. So he I think he threw the throw up emoji on the tweet. So yeah, it was that filthy.
In his or maybe it wasn't press conference, maybe it was later on, but they were talking about, it may have been Tommy Hotovy, actually. They were talking about some unique pitch design stuff with Shota. I'm like, wow, already they're talking about that with him, not even, starting spring training yet. So I thought that was interesting, where I thought maybe they would let him ease into it and, go about his routine, but they're already talking about unique things they can do to his current pitches.
Yeah.
So then I'm starting to think, oh man, what are they going to do with that breaking pitch, for example?
Yeah. And I mean, I think, of course, Tyone, very interesting. I don't know if you can tell the exact horizontal break on his fastball when he's throwing a bullpen, but
you can't.
I don't know. I'm asking you.
God.
Yeah. Would you, if you watched him throw a bullpen, would you be able to look at a couple fastballs and be like, nope, it's
Sometimes
still messed
I think
up?
they're changeups.
I do remember that. Yeah.
If they're thrown up high, sometimes they have the same shape. Yeah. But no, I can't tell. I mean, we're talking about like 2 inches of movement.
I know.
Come on.
And I think, I'm particularly, I will say too, I'm very excited to see Adbert Alzolay. And I don't necessarily expect big changes from his stuff or anything like that, but I think he's worked very hard. He's dealt with a lot of injuries. He's been at periods, I think, in his career where maybe perhaps felt this wasn't going to work or, work out the way that his, former prospect status had led up to and stuff. And the way he embraced that closer role throughout the 2023 season, the energy that he brought, the passion, just that pure, unbridled adrenaline at the end of those outings, pumping his fist. I'm very excited to see him kind of enter this spring training and this year as like, I'm the guy. Like, I finish these games, I'm the closer, and kind of being able to, really go into a year embracing that role and embracing that position on this team. He's earned it. He's an incredibly fun person to watch do it. And I'm looking forward to kind of that from day one, like, this is how he's feeling and this is what we're going to go do. I'm looking forward to watching that play out.
Yeah, so am I. I'm looking forward to hearing these guys talk about the process. We're fortunate that the players and the coaches are transparent with the process. As I, end my final thoughts here. We're fortunate that you have Jameson Taillon tell us what he wants his pitches to look like.
Yeah.
Like, what a treat that is, that I can orient myself and figure out and understand what these guys are trying to do by him telling us, I need my pitches to look exactly like this. That is a treat. And then you hear about Shota. Shota has been talking about what he does with his this is a cool clip. He was talking about how he basically tries to keep his arm like as loose as possible, which is like, oh, duh. But he intentionally doesn't he doesn't try to feel his arm until he comes through. I thought that was pretty interesting. He also talks about throwing like javelins too. So it's like stuff like this that gets you into the process and the minds of these guys. And then you have Tommy Hotovy, who's very transparent as well. He talks to our guy Ryan Herrera all the time about very specific questions, and we get to write about it. So it's fun. Spring training's fun. This is why I like spring more than any part of the year. I mean this seriously. I hate October. I really do. I hate watching playoff baseball. Fortunately, we have no playoff baseball the last few years. But I like,
fortunately.
Yeah, I like
lucky us.
Lucky us. I like relaxed, calm baseball guys taking infield practice, throwing bullpens, chewing tobacco. That's my dream right there.
You and I, so I see it, and I think especially after the last few years, I appreciate the lack of like stakes a bit. Just kind of relaxed. Pat Hughes is on some of the broadcasts. The sun is out, at least in Arizona. But You and I have always differed on this.
We're complete
I
opposite.
do not like spring training.
Love
I don't
spring
care
training.
about exhibition games. I don't care. And part of it is for what we talked about. Like I can get into seeing how guys are looking and things like that. But there's so much that you just don't know. A lot of it is so pointless. And people will
That's the
react
beauty of it.
to a bad outing by a pitcher, and he's throwing all fastballs and
You
stuff like
ignore
that.
that. That's okay.
And also, like, sometimes spring training is what gets us the stuff where like Albert Almora is real hot, and then I have to listen to people talking about how he should be hitting leadoff when the season starts.
Remember when
it gives us some of those narratives that I don't need in my life.
Remember, I understand this, by the way, but remember last year Dansby had an awful spring last year.
Yeah.
He starts April batting like 400. Yeah. So I personally don't put any stock into the performances. I put stock in what the players are saying. That's it.
Yeah,
but
that's fair.
It's fun, man. The games are on TV Saturday afternoon. You got Pat Hughes calling the game. Beautiful afternoon in Arizona. It's fun. You got to enjoy it.
I'll give you that.
But also, I will say it does point to the difference between you and me. You seek the energy. You love the energy. Yeah. Me, I'm the complete opposite. Put me in the corner. I don't care if there's anyone in the baseball stadium. Yeah. I'm a happy guy. That's the difference between you and me.
Yeah. No, yes.
That's why you like wrestling so much. You like that energy, that drama.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, I think that's what we have for you. Again, as always, whether it's a Saturday, a Sunday, a Monday, noon, 1 a.m, if there is breaking news as it relates to the Chicago Cubs, Cody Bellinger, another Scott Boras client, a trade, anything, the CHGO Cubs team will assemble on the CHGO Sports YouTube page, and we will have a reaction for you. Like I said on the council thing, I think it was 5 minutes. We were live and talking about it and reacting to it. So we appreciate CHGO and CHGO Cubs being your destination. Should that news break, we will be ready for you. And otherwise, it is time to get ready for pitchers and catchers to report, because that is coming rather soon. So you can tune in throughout the week. Next week, I believe Luke said we have a time change. I think Ryan is heading out to spring training soon to cover things for CHGO Cubs Podcast and allchgo.com. So 3:30, I think, is the time for shows next week, but check Twitter, check YouTube. They will update that if I am incorrect. And then, of course, Brendan and I will be back with you next Friday, maybe sooner, to break things down. Enjoy the Super Bowl if that is your flavor. If it is not, I hope you have a nice weekend as well. All the best to Cody Bellinger and his family. If you wanted to come back to Chicago sooner rather than later, it would really make life a lot easier for a lot of us. And I bet Cody, because I'm assuming Cody Bellinger listens to this podcast.
Oh, he does.
I bet the Cubs team can get you one of those Pat Hughes sweater shirts.
I think so.
If you ask them nicely. Probably got to come back to the Cubs to get it, but I bet they can get you one.
I think so. He can pull some strings for sure.
I think so. So that is where we will leave you. We appreciate you tuning in, appreciate your support for Brendan and I and the entire CHGO Cubs team. We will talk to you again next week. And as always, go Cubs. We all silly like the